I get so many headaches every month.
It could be chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox onabotulinum toxin A prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those who have 14 or fewer headache days a month. Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor. Visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
This episode is brought to you by Perfect Bistro Cat Food. Cats, this ad is for you. Has your human ever called you picky, persnickety, choosy? If so, Perfect Bistro Cat Food is for you. With ingredients like wild-caught tuna and pasture-raised lamb, tantalizing textures, and delectable flavors that meet even the most discerning cat standards. You're not picky, you're just perfectionists. Perfect Bistro, mealtime perfection for every cat. Have your human visit perfectbistro.com.
Hello and welcome back to Immigrantly. I am your host, Saadia Khan. The days are getting shorter. Fall is almost here. My favorite season of the year. You know, this summer has had its ebbs and flows. The ebbs and flows of being an entrepreneur, of founding a company that's trying to break a very old American habit. You know the one. The immigrant story. The grateful immigrant. No thoughts, no opinions, no agency, useful to everybody, and only as somebody else's talking point. I'll be honest, guys, breaking that habit hasn't been easy. The funding, the sponsorships, building the whole thing from nothing, the doubt, the roadblocks, the snub, and I mean the active kind. So today, I'm going to ask you for a favor, a big one. If you're a founder, if you work at a foundation, if you work anywhere that says it believes in changing whose stories get told, come find me. And if that's not you, but you know someone, please get me to them. Guys, the reality is it takes a village. It takes more of one when you're building something that doesn't exist yet. And now to today's guest. Fun fact, I found her on Instagram. I was scrolling, as always, the way, you do at 11 at night. And there she was, this woman calmly talking about a piece of economic policy in about 90 seconds. No shouting, no doom, just here's how this actually works. And here's who it's working for. And not just that, she was pretty active during FIFA World Cup as well. And I was hooked. What I didn't know was that the Instagram is the smallest thing about her. Erika Lucas was born and raised in Mexico. She started her career there helping international companies set up shop. Then she came to the US. She worked in economic development for the state of Oklahoma, then private equity, which is to say she's been inside the machine that decides who gets money in this country. She's seen how those rooms actually talk. And then she left and built something to go around it. She co-founded StitchCrew, which gets capital and networks to founders the system overlooks. Women, people of color, people in the middle of the country. It runs at an accelerator with the NBA's Oklahoma City Thunder. She founded Vest, a network for women professionals, and Vest Her Ventures, a fund backing women-led companies in the care economy. Her TEDx talk is called America's Trillion Dollar Blindspot. She's a Latina immigrant in Oklahoma City. Guys, that gives me goosebumps. And her whole job is telling people on the coasts that their money is pointed the wrong way. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Hi, Erika. How are you doing?
How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for accepting my invitation. So, let me tell you something. I was scrolling on Instagram as I always do, 11 at night, and then I see your face, calm, collected, trying to break down ideas, policy ideas, even World Cup stories and political stuff in such a calm fashion. And I was like, okay, she has a huge following, so she is absolutely doing something right. But it goes against the grain of like Instagram, rage baiting, clickbaiting, that angry persona, right? And I love what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
But there's so much more to you than Instagram. And that's what surprised me because I was like, okay, she is an influencer. She is an Instagram personality. And I was like, okay, this is a very small part of what she actually does. So, Erika, take me back to who you are, where you grew up, and what were some of the initial influences in your life?
Well, again, thank you for having me. Love the platform, by the way. I started researching before saying yes. And obviously, I love the work that you do and the stories that you're bringing forth. So I'm an immigrant, born and raised in Chihuahua, Mexico. And typical immigrant story, I came here when I was 13 years old with my single mother at the time and my younger sister without knowing a lick of English. And we ended up in rural Oklahoma because my mom's sister lived there. And so I came here, learned English, went to school. I stayed here for 2 years. And then I decided to go back to Mexico to live with my grandparents. It was very hard for me to assimilate here. I had learned that language. I made friends however I could, but it just didn't feel like home. So I ended up going back to Mexico. That's where I started my career, actually. I have been in what I now consider very extracting industries. I started with, this was back when NAFTA had just started and Mexico really opened up to privatization. And so because I knew English at that point, I was actually hired by a company that basically focuses on helping multinational companies offshore to Mexico to benefit from the lower cost of labor.
Absolutely.
So I did that in the manufacturing sector. And then when I came back to visit my mom, I ended up staying because I met my husband. He's from here. So I've been here for now 22 years. I actually work for the state of Oklahoma doing the same thing. So attracting foreign direct investment. So global companies that would establish operations in the state of Oklahoma, create jobs here. One of the industries we were heavily recruiting was aerospace and defense. So that's what led me to private equity. And that's actually when I started paying attention to the lack of funding that goes to women, our communities, people of color, the lack of funding that exists for early stage companies. Got curious on that, ended up leaving private equity to start StitchCrew, which is a nonprofit organization that I still run that focuses on basically creating economic mobility for underrepresented. Actually, we're not underrepresented, we're underserved entrepreneurs.
Right.
and I've been doing that for, again, since that was 2017 when we started. So if you fast forward to today, we've supported over 300 businesses with capital access, with support for, coaching on growing discipline on how to grow your business sustainably. And one of the other things that we've noticed was that a lot of the women we were helping that were starting businesses not because it was cool or sexy, but rather because they felt pushed out of the labor force, pushed out of traditional corporate America, right? Because unfortunately today we haven't optimized and actualized our labor systems. And so there's not a lot of flexible work environments for caregivers, and unfortunately, and it's still today, most of the caregiving is done by women.
Right.
That forces us often to take career breaks or to exit the labor force. And then they make it even harder for us to re-enter. And so anyways, that led to the other organization that I lead, which is VEST, which is a peer network of women professionals where we basically help each other achieve economic mobility through the traditional labor force sense. And that organization also has a fund that invests in women-led companies that are inventing solutions that better support not just women, but families and caregivers.
I have so many questions for you because I was also watching your TEDx. First of all, I was so glad that you, through that talk, were able to debunk the myth of, these billionaires creating something from nothing. And I was like, preach, sister, because that's not the story that we hear often. But I do want to rewind and talk about your own family. Now, you've talked about how a lot of your family members are entrepreneurs. They started businesses out of need, not ambition. And Erica, I was thinking, how do you parse out the two? Like, how do you differentiate between need versus ambition? Because when I think of need, I feel like the ambition component probably lingers somewhere underneath as well, right? Because any entrepreneur, whether they started out of need or purely ambition, they want to be successful. So, how do you parse it out?
Well, I think you don't, right? Because I think you're right. I think that, we all have a certain level of ambition, right? It might look different based on a lot of different things. But I think we all have ambition within us, whether it's just the ambition to better provide for a family or whether it's ambition to do better than our parents or grandparents. There's different levels. And I think a lot of it is influenced by the way you grow up, by the resources that you have, whether or not you have generational wealth, whether or not you're exposed to networks that show you what different levels of ambitions look like. So I think you don't differentiate it. What I mean when I say that, certain people start businesses out of need as opposed to just the perceived sexiness of building wealth is that for the most part, I help business owners that are trying to do better for their family. Maybe they went to college, maybe they didn't go to college, maybe they see entrepreneurship as the only way or the fastest way to provide those opportunities for their family. Maybe they do it again because they felt pushed out of the traditional workforce environment, right? Maybe they were caregivers and they need the flexibility to do it. So there's a lot of things I think that I would consider need as opposed to like, I want to build wealth for me and my family. And, I think that's for me the biggest differentiation when it comes to the work that we do, particularly with StitchCrew Invest.
And I do agree with you there because I feel like entrepreneurs, the way you describe them, those who build something out of need because they can't be part of the workforce, the traditional trajectory of sorts. You're right. A lot of them are struggling as well. They are the ones who face a number of roadblocks. As an entrepreneur, summer has been such a mesh of ebbs and flows. One day you're like, okay, this is wonderful, this is great. But then when you see no funding coming in, no sponsorships, no sustainability, and you're like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, what the actual fuck am I doing here? Right. But you've been on the other side, the private equity, the investment side, the cool, sexy side, the side that all of us are trying to impress. Let's be honest, all entrepreneurs or founders do that. Take me into a meeting. What is something that you guys talk about when we are not there? And by we, I mean founders. When founders have left the room, what kind of conversations do you guys have?
So before I answer your question, I want to be very clear because we talk about this a lot at StitchCrew and with the participants that we support. Never put an investor in a pedestal because we are just people. And for the most part, I would say 99.9% of the time, we're not the smartest person in the room. Some of us may like to think that we are, but we're not. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see first-time founders make or early-stage founders make is that they do put investors in a pedestal and they forget that they're presenting us with an opportunity to invest in what they're working on day to day. So
Right.
the most knowledgeable person about your business that will be in the room is you because you're working at it every day, because you understand your audience more intimately than I will ever be, because you understand the problem more intimately than I will ever be. What we talk about most of the time, I was in private equity, and then venture. So venture capital is a system of private equity, but designed for early stage companies. So two different conversations, but I think you're referring to early stage entrepreneurs. So I'll focus on venture. So in this case, we're basically putting a lot of the bet, really it's a bet that we're taking. So the risk really is, can this person that we just talked to do what they say they're going to do? Right? Do we trust enough that they answer the questions in a way that mitigates the risk for us? Do they understand their problem intimately? Do they understand why their solution is not just a little bit better, but 10 times better than what's already in the market? And even if it's not there yet, do they understand the path or what they need to build in order to be better, significantly better than the competitors? Do they understand who their competitors is? So it really, I don't care what investors say on their website, because a lot of investors like to, especially in tech, they like to portray themselves as the saviors of this world. And they'll say, we invest in founders and we invest in blah, blah. At the end of the day, especially if you're a firm, not just an angel investor, but a firm, at the end of the day, it's not our money that we're investing, it's somebody else's money. So we need to mitigate the risk of investing in your company. So a lot of the conversation is going to be whether or not you as a founder made us feel more confident in giving you the money that you need to do what you say you're going to do.
But Erika, to me, it sounds counterproductive. If you are trying to mitigate risk, then a lot of ideas that are ahead of their time or that are unspoken for or by entrepreneurs who bring a different perspective by the way of where they grew up or whatever their background is, those ideas are never materialized because the focus is so much on risk mitigation. And entrepreneurship, by its very nature, should be unencumbered by the degree of risk that it ensues, right? So, what do you think about that?
That's a great question. And I think that this is where entrepreneurs can get creative. There's different ways to de-risk your business. If you don't have the product built yet, or you don't have the revenue or the customer base already set, right? If you're really early and you really are betting all of this on an idea that you have, then de-risk it by telling us why you should be the person, why this idea merits investment, why it needs to exist, and why you're the right person to build it. Some founders can then use their personal track record or their lived experience as a way to do that. Some founders can sell us on the vision. This is where men do a better job, I would say, than women, only because, but there's nuance there, only because men, is not that they're more willing to take risks than we are, is because we have gotten smarter to know that we don't have the same latitude to fail as our male peers. So we are already know that we have to be 10 times more prepared. We have to prove points before we even get the meeting, all of those stuff. So a lot of it is psychological. But I would say, I've seen several, this is not to critique or to put anybody down, but I've seen a lot of male founders come in and be uber confident on an idea, and they don't even have ways to back it up, right? They just had an idea, they think it's a great idea, and they want investment to it, and then they just go for it. To where Most of us women feel like, oh, well, I need to validate this idea first, and I need to get proof points, and I need to research the heck out of it. We start questioning all of these things. And so I do think that we women need to take our shots more often. And I have a whole thesis about the imposter syndrome. But this is where I would say to women, next time you start doubting yourself, don't. Because look at how many mediocre men get in positions that they don't deserve only because they're shot, right?
But here's the added layer of complexity, Erica. I think it's also pretty much based on the results, right? Men, when they come into a room with the confidence and the gravitas of we can do this, even if it's just an idea, they do get funded. The irony is they get funded, especially white males, they get funded. A woman enters the room, first of all, it's the gender liability, unfortunately. Add another layer of an accent, an immigrant, somebody who does not understand the structures and the systems as well, cannot really articulate thoughts in a language that's not their first language. And the whole calculus changes. And I kid you not, somebody who grew up speaking English, because I was born in a country that was British colony before 1947. Like I speak 5 languages, but English is something I grew up with and I'm fluent in. But that code switching and that imposter syndrome, as you describe, is a real thing for women, for immigrant women, for women with accents, because the results don't match up to, oh, women should be confident. How do women become confident if they get so many no's before they even get one yes, versus men who, even with an idea, can get the kind of funding that women could never think of?
This is where I think we have to talk about the other side, because most of the conversations always put the responsibility on the founders. You have to be more confident. You have to have your shit together. You have to have the perfect deck. You have to reach X amount of investors. But in reality, when we're looking at how decisions are made and who's making those decisions, there's a lot of biases involved, right? So it's not just the man pitch with more confidence or that they shoot more shots than we do. It's also that on the investor side, there's a lot of biases that we can't control. I mean, if you look at all of the assets under management, and all the private investments that it's managed, 98% is managed by white males. And so there's like a implicit bias already that they're going to invest in people that look like them, because that's who makes up their networks. That's who they're going to see more often, especially if they're not intentional about curating pipelines and deals from people that don't look like them. I get frustrated with them, and it is my job as somebody that wants to change systems to talk about that. But I will not tell founders, don't waste your time trying to change it, because you'll just end up frustrated. What I want founders to know rather is, first of all, if I can convince you not to take private, like especially venture capital, I'm going to go for it, because I think venture is very extractive. I think it's needed for certain types of companies, and depending on what you're building and the business model that you're building, you're going to need infusions of capital for growth. I think it's more important for the founder to understand that there are options, and that you need to go after the right type of capital and the right type of investment at the right stage of your company to then grow sustainably. Put more attention on that than trying to convince people that have biases entrenched in them, because then we're wasting our time.
Once somebody said to me, don't try to convert the non-believers. And I think that is such an important thing. Why run after people who do not believe in what you are building?
I mean, the simple answer would be, if you are dead set on talking to venture investors, then it's going to be a numbers game, and you need to find the right investors that do believe in your idea, that have done the work to maybe mitigate some of the biases that they may have, that they are willing to look at talent in places maybe that they're not used to looking, that they're willing to take the risk on truly genuine new ideas. But I also would caution founders. We talk so much about private investment and investors that I think we do a disservice to founders to think that's the only way to scale, right? There are other ways to access even private investment, right? With angel investors, it's a whole different category of investment. And I wish it was easier to access capital in other ways. But I always feel that the best capital you're going to have to grow your business is revenue based or leverage based. And it takes a little bit longer, because there's other challenges that you're going to have to overcome. But just venture capital, really, I've been in it. It's not as sexy as some people think it is.
Do you consider yourself a success story?
I think I consider myself an evolving story. I've had successes, yes, but I've also had, for every success, I probably had like 10 different failures. And I'm always learning, and I'm always adapting. I think if it's one thing that I wish founders would go in building their business with is if your fear is stopping you from launching that business or from growing that business or your imposter syndrome, know this: failure is a part of the process. So don't think of it as I'm either going to win or I'm either going to lose. You're going to do both.
Right.
And like you said, some days are going to feel amazing and you're going to get some wins. And then the next day is going to be like, why am I doing this? I just need to go back to a salary, because it's both. Another thing that I hear founders think is, if I just raise this seed round, then all of my problems are going to go away. No, they don't. They just become different problems, right?
Yeah. And as a founder, what I've realized, first, I will say this to all the immigrant founders out there, a huge shout out. We can make things work at the fraction of the cost that non-immigrant founders would, right? It surely gives us heartburn at night. That's a different story. But immigrant founders know how to be creative when they are scaling, when they are leveraging, because they know how to code switch. They know how to adapt, something that a lot of founders don't. But you mentioned something that really stuck with me. You said you want to change the systems. Erika, your success story, don't you think it could be used as a proof that the system works?
I'm a success story despite of the system. That's why I'm saying I don't even consider it a success story, because I want to do more. And in order for me to do more, I have to work against these systems. I'm a Latina immigrant in the middle of the country, fighting not only just access to capital, but biases and then policies that are very conservative that make it 10 times as hard for immigrants, particularly in this day and age, to be successful. I tell people all the time that ask me, about the work that we do in this political environment. And I say, you want immigrants to take risk and you want immigrants to build businesses. But how can anyone build businesses and build jobs and create jobs and do all of that when there's a fear of whether or not your family is going to be okay when you return home? The environment in which you operate has a lot to do whether or not people reach a level of success, if you will. And so, again, I don't consider myself a success story. I consider myself as, I'm still working and evolving, and there's so much I want to do still. But the success that I have achieved, I've achieved despite the way things work.
So, what is one thing about the system, and I'm sure there are a million, that you really want to change, that you think is a huge roadblock, not just in terms of access to capital and democratization of the investor space, but also to creativity?
Well, I think it is related to access to capital, but it's not just, creating mechanisms to disperse funding to entrepreneurs. I want to change the face of the people who are writing the checks. That's a different conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
When you do that, then you figure out the creativity part, right? Because to your point right now, when you have 98, almost 99% of investors, people that are making these decisions, by the way, whether we're talking about private investment in the traditional sense of institutional capital, or whether you're talking about angel investors. Angel investors is a little bit better, but it's still like 80% of the people look the same, right? Philanthropy, the same,
Oh my gosh, yeah.
right? So until we change the face and the lived experience, like, if we had more people, I'm not just talking about gender or race, I'm talking about lived experiences. Then those people then start looking at problems differently. Oh my gosh, all of a sudden your solution becomes a lot more relevant and a lot more needed because I've experienced the same problem, right? But right now, the people that are making the solutions are where the money flows. I mean, we're seeing it right now with politics. Right now, the way people are measuring our economy is based on the stock market, even though 90% of the stock market is owned by the top 1%, most of it. But it's because the people making the decision as to how we measure our economy look and act the same and come from experiences that are very different than the majority of Americans. If I could change one thing, that would be it, who we are putting in positions of power to distribute resources and funding across spectrum, not just for entrepreneurship. And probably that's why I become so vocal on social media, because I can do what I do with StitchCrew Invest each and every day. But given direct access to capital to entrepreneurs is not going to do it. We need to change the systems and therefore the policies that compound inequality all across so that people can, in fact, achieve more economic mobility. And that starts by changing the people that are making those policies.
But my skeptic is just coming out right now. And I will say something that has been on my mind for a long time. What I've noticed, and again, I don't have as many data points, maybe a few, people from different lived experiences, different backgrounds, when they become part of the system in order to change the system, the machinery from within, they buy into and subscribe to the same ideology that the system is perpetuating, right? How do we change that?
I mean, now you're describing the human. I'm a skeptic too, by the way. And I have to work each and every day to remind myself that hope is a discipline and that to be leaders, we need hope and that we need to believe that things can be better. But I struggle with it each and every day, especially as I see humans be humans. To your point, I think, a lot of us think if I can just get in there. And by the way, I used to think this way, in venture. That's why I launched the fund, venture capital fund, to invest in women, right? I want to be part of the solution. But I was building something within the system that was already, in my view, is completely broken. And in fact, I think both private equity and venture capital is terrible. I think we need to build more local, small, and organically grown companies. But that's for another podcast. But back to why people assimilate. I think people assimilate for two things. One, to be in proximity to power. That's what you're describing. But the other reason people assimilate is to survive. And so I used to be, when I was young, I used to be very critical and would lash out and be like, how dare you? You just become this. And sometimes I still do it, especially if they're searching proximity to power as opposed to survival. But now I try to have more empathy towards people that assimilate to broken systems because they're trying to survive and provide for their family.
But aren't they doing more harm, Erika, than good? Because then they become the face of the system that is so racialized and so discriminatory, and it gives the system more credibility because now they can really plaster that face onto their brochure and say, hey, we are equitable, we are diverse.
100%. I mean, until we all realize that we have to create policies, pathways for prosperity in a way that's more equitable. And we have to really do that. Starts with looking within and how am I part of the problem? Am I being part of the problem by doing this? Am I doing this to better myself or to better the collective for the generations to come? Right. And so I do think that it requires us to do a lot of internal work. And this is, by the way, another reason why I don't consider myself a success story, because I'm still learning. I'm still part of the problem, I'm sure, in a lot of ways. And I think it takes intentional effort to continue to learn and to continue to want to do the internal work and deconstructing a lot of beliefs that, especially as, somebody like me that has been in traditional economic development and private equity and like all these extractive industries, I've had to do a lot of questioning my own set of beliefs and where they come from. And I had to let a lot of new data come in to do that. But it took an intentional effort for me to want to do that. And I struggle each and every day still.
I get so many headaches every month.
It could be chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more.
Botox onabotulinum toxin A prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those who have 14 or fewer headache days a month. Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor. Visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
I love the difference that you are talking about: self-serving, individualistic versus collective, generational, right? Because I do consider myself a privileged immigrant. I am comfortable financially where I am, but what I'm building that makes me so uncomfortable at times and gives me these emotional ebbs and flows is what I'm trying to build for the future generations, what I'm trying to build for my daughters, so that they feel that they belong a little more than the previous generations. And they feel that this is home more than I ever felt or I ever could feel. But I also want to pivot to you, Erika, as a person. And being an immigrant who's loud and proud, I can definitely identify, fellow immigrant who is loud and proud, doesn't really shrink themselves into, oh, I'm grateful, or I will do everything for everybody. And I see that in you. Has being loud cost you a check or something that you wished it didn't?
Yes. Yes, it's cost me definitely funding for our organization. It's cost me personal relationships. There is a very real cost to be as vocal as I am. When it comes to funding, I would say even in the millions. But I would say, I think this is where the internal work matters, because once you're convicted, I have conviction in what I believe, and I can be moved, and persuaded, of course, when it comes to policies and solutions. Of course, we can debate those all day, but where I have done a lot of work to have conviction is on my values. And so when I share my opinion, or when I express this is the way we're going to move and how we're going to move, I do it based on that set of conviction. And that's what gives me the courage to know, keep going. Because, by the way, I have lost funding and funders and relationships and opportunities, but I've also gained some, right? At the same time, I've lost $1 million opportunity. Another one came in from the most unexpected. I'm just going to give them a shout out. They're a funder from Canada. At the time, the U.S. was just not treating our Canadian brothers and sisters very well right now. And they came in and literally provided crucial funding that we needed at that time, because we had just lost that big opportunity. And so I would say, yes, it's cost me, but it's also reminded me that the right funders, if they don't believe in our mission and our conviction and our values, they're probably not the right funders anyway. So let me create space and let me chase the funders that are better aligned with us. And so it's just a matter of changing perspective, but it takes a lot of work. And I will say for our community, we have to do a lot of work when it comes to a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's taken me a long time, right? At the beginning, I was like, I better not say anything. I don't want to piss off anybody. What would so and so think? And a lot of it was because my own scarcity mindset was like, oh, you have to hold on to your dear. And then when I started shifting my mindset to like, there's funding everywhere. There's opportunity everywhere. And I want to chase the ones that are better aligned with us and the work that we do. And we're serious about this. Then everything started opening up and more opportunities and more funders. And I would argue better funders started popping up. And then we also have the funders that have been with us from day one. And I will always be so grateful that despite the way I operate and I move around the world, they still believe in the work that we do. And so I'm very grateful for that.
And authenticity is priceless. It really surprises me why people would want you to be somebody you're not, right? The way I speak, my accent, the thoughts I have, how vocal I am about certain things. That's who I am. That's what I grew up with. And believe you me, as a Muslim founder, that's another layer that Erika, you and I could talk about for hours and hours. But we talked about building something for the future generations or having that goalpost. What is your motivation? What is your trigger? Who motivates you to do something?
My girls. I am the proud mother of two beautiful girls who just, they're the reason I get up every day. And they're the reason I want to create a better system. Because if we think about it, everything that we're doing right now, our kids are going to inherit. My girls, daughters of immigrants, identify as Latinas, identify as LGBTQ, they have their own challenges. And I want to create a better world for them. So I know that a lot of the work that I do is probably not going to have any meaning for my lifetime, but hopefully it'll move the needle a little bit, even if it's just a little bit for their generation. And I actually place a lot more
bet on their generation.
On the next generation. Yeah, I think they're better about setting boundaries and about imagining a better world for people.
How important do you think coalition building is in this? And the reason why I ask, I see a lot of different communities within US who are living in silos. And I've always said this, one of the motivations for me to create Immigrantly Media was to basically replicate what America is, a microcosm of America, not limited to a particular nationality, ethnicity, sexual orientation. Unfortunately, a lot of our communities are living in silos, and it goes back to what you said, scarcity mindset, right? How do we break through that? How do we build coalitions that exist beyond those limitations? Because there is a power in being a critical mass.
Absolutely. So your first question is, how important do I think it is? I think it's the most important thing we could do, especially right now. Because at the end of the day, if you strip away identities and labels and, even cultures, what most of us want is to be able to do what exactly you describe, why you want to do better. It's for our families. We want to provide financial stability for them, opportunity for them, because you and I probably started way back in the baseline. And everybody else got, on third base. Then we either want to change the damn system so that everybody starts at the same level or to get them in third base, right? I mean, we all want that. And that's why, one, I think the coalition is so important, because once we understand that, then we can look at creating policies and systems that get everybody an equal footing, as opposed to like, well, why should you as an immigrant get more funding than us? Okay, well, then let's make it equitable for everyone, shall we?
Yeah.
And I think it starts with, to your point, how do we do it? I think it starts by listening and by approaching conversation with curiosity, as opposed to like judgmental or being judgmental or even as let's not approach conversations to come up with a solution. Let's approach conversations to just have a better understanding of your lived experiences and my lived experiences, and then start identifying patterns of where things are not working for everyone, and let's fix those patterns. I think that if we approach that with more humanity, right, and with more curiosity, I think we would be in a different place right now.
I love that. And sometimes I struggle with this because I am a proud immigrant and a proud Muslim and all. But at the same time, sometimes I feel like it's important to recalibrate and pivot from those identifiers into shared humanity and lived experiences, because even now, both of us have girls and we are building something as women to honor future generations. And that's something that binds you and I together. And in the end, if you were to define the United States of America, and I'll tweak it a bit in the context of equitable access to capital, how would you do that?
Extractive.
Ah, that's a powerful word.
And, I get a lot of heat from, I live in Oklahoma. It's one of the most conservative states in the nation. I live with people that I would say are very smart, but a lot of them haven't done the work to better understand systems. And I catch a lot of criticism because they say, it sounds like you don't love America. And I'm like, no, because I love this country is that I criticize our shortcomings, because I do believe in the vision of what we can be. But it's still a vision.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. We are invested. Somebody recently told me that home is where you envision your grandchildren to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, is the United States of America. And that's why I am so invested and critical, because I want America to be the best version of herself.
100%. And so I want to be clear. I love this country. And because I love this country, I'm critical of where our shortcomings are. So your question was, how would I define America tied to access to capital? I'm not saying that the country is not an opportunity for a lot of people to build successful business. And there is a lot of capital available to do that. But in its current form, the way we currently access capital and deploy capital, it's extremely extractive. And I will stand by that. And anybody that looks at our history and the current deployment of capital, once you do the work, trust me, you cannot unsee it.
Erika, this was such a pleasure. And I'm so glad I was able to connect with a fellow immigrant with similar vision. Where can people find you on Instagram? Any website they can go and check out? Share all your information with us.
Yes, thank you. Well, if you want to learn more about the organizations that I co-lead, please go to StitchCrew, so StitchCrew.com. That's the arm that focuses on entrepreneurs. The arm that focuses on women professionals is VEST. So that is VEST.co. So not fully.com, but just .co. And for my personal shenanigans, you can find me on Instagram and TikTok. And that is just Erika. I think it's Erika_Lucas07. I started sharing frustration as a way to just get it out there, but I don't consider so.
But you share it in such an endearing way. That's what I love about it.
Thank you. But in fairness to my, I have a lot of friends that are professional creators, and I don't come anywhere near them. So, but thank you.
Thank you, Erika. This was wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
Sure, you can criticize social media, and I do that all the time. But the good thing about social media is you get to connect with people you would not otherwise. Erika, it was such a pleasure to sit down and talk with, virtually, of course. I'll be honest, I wanted to ask her about her experiences in Oklahoma City because, as someone who's lived in New York for the last 16 years, I am almost scared of conservative cities. There is a lot of hate. And as an immigrant, that makes me nervous. But then talking to Erika also made me realize that at the end of the day, the biases, the preconceived notions we have about other people, cultures, places, is in some ways driven by what we are fed. And while we want other people to look inwards and not believe everything they are taught, we should do the same for ourselves. And that's what I am going to do. So if you are from the South and if you happen to listen to Immigrantly, reach out to me. Would love to connect and know why this podcast matters to you. This episode was written and produced by me, Saadia Khan. The editorial review is done by Shay Yu. Our incredible sound designer is Lou Raskin. Our theme music is done by Simon Hutchinson. Other music by Epidemic Sound. Guys, come back next week when I have an important conversation around 9/11's 25th anniversary. Until then, take care and be kind to others.